Hi, long range hunting. Today we're going to be talking about barrel life. This is something I wanted to cover because there's a lot of misinformation about this. I see a lot of guys that aren't buying certain cartridges because they're like, it's a barrel burner, it's not going to be worth my money, I'm going to have to change barrels all the time, and they're passing on really good cartridges because of that, or they're spending money and they really don't need to, and they're swapping perfectly good barrels out. And so I wanted to touch base on this, and we're going to break down each little section of this so you guys get a better understanding. Now, the rifle I have in front of me is a custom built 308. It's a M40 clone and a gun that I actually love. It's a phenomenal weapon system. 308s are great on barrel life. Now, most of these experts are going to tell you, especially like the bench rest guys and stuff, that you're going to get about 5,000 rounds max out of a 308. This rifle is 11 years old, the original barrel, and I've got 14,000 rounds on this barrel. And it still shoots sub MOA out to 1,200 yards. So how is that possible? Well, those estimates aren't really realistic. That's based off bench rest guys who are going for very specific velocities and very specific group sizes. So if it's barely off, if the group opens up just a little bit, they're going to toss that barrel because that measurement, that small group, is what gives them the edge in that competition. And so they have certain barrel life standards that they're going to go by that's not really realistic in the real world. Badlands Tactical Training Facility, where I trained 10 years ago, a decade ago, they had a rifle, a student rifle there. I don't know how many rounds it has on it now, but at the time it was a student rifle, 308, and it had 25,000 rounds down the tube. Original barrel, and it was still sub MOA at $1,000. So I know people are going to say, oh, well, it's a 308, it can do that, other cartridges can't. But we're going to dive in real quick and go into the whole barrel thing step by step, and that way you guys have a better understanding of all this. Now, when you first get a brand new barrel, the first thing you're going to do is break that barrel in. Now, what is that? That's where the barrel is fresh. It's been, the rifling's been cut. It can have some small tooling marks, stuff like that. And basically you're shooting clean, shoot clean, etc. And what you're doing is smoothing that out and removing anything that's in there. So you're going to shoot, and anything that's knocked loose or anything from the tooling is going to be pushed out when you clean it. Then you're going to shoot. I don't really have a specific one I do. Some people are very set in what they do. I follow whatever the manufacturer recommends. The reason I do that is because if there's any issues, accuracy or whatever, and they ask about the break-in process, I can honestly say, I did your break-in. So I just do whatever they recommend. I mean, some people might lie to them. I'm not that kind of a guy. So I like to do just whatever they recommend because it's their rifle. Now, once you have the break-in process, and this is something that you're going to see with a lot of competition guys, I'm not even talking about bench rest, I'm talking about PRS, more real-world shooting. They have a break-in process, not the cleaning part, it comes after that, but what they're doing is they're shooting, and as that barrel gets worn in and worn smooth, at a certain point you're going to hit an increase in velocity as that barrel basically settles in, as it gets smoothed out. And so that's going to be generally between 300 and 500 rounds. And so these guys will have just bullets they're going to use, cheap ammunition. They'll shoot through it and they'll burn that in, shoot the 100 rounds. And what that's doing is gets them to where when they do their data, because again, they're talking about competition, they don't want to be in the middle of a competition and all of a sudden that bullet starts speeding up, and now their data is off. So what they're going to do is just get some cheap ammunition, they're going to burn it through, get it to where it's sped up, and then they're going to do load development. And so generally speaking, I just go by the 500 number. That's what I'm going to do for these examples. But that's what a lot of them do. So once you get there, you're 500 rounds in with that new barrel, let's just say, and then you still are going to shoot for the life of it. Now, at a certain point, that barrel is going to start to slow down. Now, a lot of people think it's just the rifling getting worn down too much, and that's not really the case. What's actually happening is it's called throat erosion. Now, inside here, where the actual cartridge goes in the bullet, you have the throat of where that bullet is going into the actual barrel, inside the chamber. And so that, from the explosions of that and that projectile going through, that's going to have a certain amount of erosion. Now, what's that going to do? You're not going to be getting all that pressure pushed forward, and so it's going to drop your velocity. I mean, it's not a whole lot. This one has dropped in 14,000 rounds about 70 feet per second is what I've lost. So that's what's really going on. The barrel itself is not actually, getting super worn in at that point. And so you're going to get to that point, and a lot of guys, they're going to call that the end of the life of the barrel. They're going to say, you know what, it's slowing down, there's erosion in there, I'm tossing it, getting a new barrel, and they're slapping that on. Well, let's dive into what goes into that, cost, etc. Now let's go into this and the cost and everything that goes into it. Now, let's say that I want to change out this barrel. So you already have the rifle, whether you slapped it together yourself or somebody built it. You've already paid for the barrel and the gunsmithing and all that. But let's look at it from a new perspective. If I was going to buy a fresh barrel for this, have the gunsmithing done, and then shoot the rounds required in order to speed that barrel up so I can use it. Now, it's going to cost, just rough numbers, about $1,000 for getting this and then having a gunsmith do the gunsmithing. So for easy math, let's do 500 for the barrel, 500 for the gunsmithing, and then you still have to shoot in order to speed it up and get it to where you can do your load development and do what you need to do. So let's say $1 a round roughly, to be quite honest, for what we're dealing with for the cheap stuff these days. And so let's do $1 a round, so that's $500. So we're looking at $1,500, right? So every time I change this barrel, roughly, or another barrel, it's going to cost me $1,500 to get a new barrel on there and have it back in action. That's a lot of money. If you really think about it, let's say that you have a more efficient cartridge as far as velocity, but it's a barrel burner, and let's say you're getting 2,000 rounds out of the barrel, just for, again, simple math. So let's say I get 2,000 rounds on this, I want to change it out. Well, guess what? I've got to pay that $1,500, get a new barrel, and every time. And so to, let's say, do total of 5 barrels, just for reference point, that's 10,000 rounds down range, and that's going to cost you like $7,500. I mean, you can literally have an entire gun with scope and optic and everything built for that much. Now, that can get really expensive. Now, something that people will do, because the actual erosion in the throat is what's going bad. Now, the barrel itself isn't. A lot of people think that that barrel itself, the rifling, is getting so worn down, and that's not really the case. The barrel's still perfectly good. It's just the throat. And so what a lot of guys will do is they'll buy an even longer barrel. So example, a buddy of mine, he'll get a 30 or a 32-inch barrel on his first one. I'm just going to use 30 for a quick example. So for the same situation with 2,000 rounds per change, he starts out with a 30-inch barrel. Now, once he hits that 2,000 rounds and it needs to be changed, what he's going to do is take it in, they're going to chop a couple inches off, removing that chamber, and then they're going to rechamber it. Now, what's the advantage of this? Well, because the barrel is not only still good, but it's already broke in, you don't have to shoot that 500 rounds. You can go straight to it, and you don't have to worry about spending extra money, on an extra $500 per barrel on that. So it does save you money. You're also not having to buy a new barrel each time. And so you're cutting down $1,000 right there. 500 for the barrel and 500 for the ammunition. So same barrel, and you're just cutting it down from 30 to 28. Now you can go shoot that, get 2,000 rounds of it. When it's ready again, chop it, and then do the same thing. And again, each time you're only paying for the gunsmithing. You're not paying for 500 rounds each time or for a new barrel. And so let's say you cut it down from 30 to 28 to 26 to 24 to 22, which is what some of my buddies actually do. Now, when you get to that point, you're 5 barrels in, right? Now, the 5 barrel setup with doing a new one each time was $7,500. With doing it this way, when you're just chopping it, it brings it down from the initial to all the way at the end, 10,000 rounds, only $3,500. We're talking a difference of $4,000, which is a full custom rifle with, minus the optic, but you can get a custom rifle like this built for that. So it's a big deal when you're saving that kind of money. Now, some people, especially in the competition world, they want to stick with a specific barrel length. They have sponsors, they have money, etc. And so they don't mind, swapping a barrel. It's not a big deal to them, and they want specific velocities kept, etc. And these are just different options for you. But what a lot of these guys do that I know is when it hits a certain point where it starts to slow down, the barrel's not even bad with the erosion. That's a misconception. What people don't understand is there's very simple tweaks you can do that are going to get you back in action. So let's take this one. I'm shooting the same load and it still shoots phenomenal, so I don't touch it. However, that throat erosion has changed where that bullet sits in relation to the lands. And that's where that bullet is coming into the lands of the rifling. Now, certain bullets are jump sensitive. And so you can either change your seating depth to adjust it back to where it is in that jump space that it likes, or you can just do load development over again and you're good to go. So it's just a simple change, but a lot of guys don't think of that or don't want to mess with it. So simple load development or a tweak there on your seating depth can solve your problem right there. So what a lot of guys I know do that are the pros. They'll take those barrels when they go to swap them out, because they get barrels all the time. What they'll do is try to hook up people, either sell them for cheap or even sometimes give them to buddies that are trying to get into PRS, etc. And that way they get the barrel, and then all that's got to be done is put on an action and headspace. And that way they have a nice custom barrel. Then they can do their own load development, even with that throat erosion, and have a super accurate barrel, because it's not even bad at that point. So that, if you can find somebody that does that, it's a great way to get a barrel. And plus, it's not even one of the new ones where you have to sit there and break it in. It's already broken in, so you can start your load development and be good to go from the start. So I mean, really, a lot of people are throwing away perfectly good barrels. Bench rest is kind of an extreme that you shouldn't even pay attention to. I mean, those guys are the masters of hand loading, which is great, but their tolerances and what's realistic are two completely different things. It's great for what they do, and if you want to go that anal retentive, you can, but honestly, they'll lose an eighth of an MOA or eighth of an inch in accuracy, and they toss a barrel. And it still shoots, better than a lot of custom guns are going to do, and they'll toss it over that. So for realistic, for even people shooting precision long range, there's no need to do that. I mean, this gun will do everything I need and more. And I mean, I put a lot of time in it. You can see from, the cheek, you can see from the bolt. I put a lot of time and energy behind this rifle, and it's still an absolute tack driver when I do my part. I've got other cartridges that, people tell me I should already be done with, like that 300 Win Mag's got a ton of rounds on it. I mean, I think I got 3,000 on that, and I'm running them, pretty hot with a 208 grain bullet at just under 3,000 feet per second. Now, that's starting to slow down. I have had to change mine on that. However, it still shoots very accurately, and I didn't even mess with seating depths or anything. So, don't be afraid to lose a little velocity. I mean, if you start getting accuracy issues, that's one thing. But, realistically, most people, 95% of people, to be honestly, will never shoot enough to actually warrant changing a barrel. That's just the simple truth. The vast majority of guys don't spend that much time on the range. They don't shoot as much as, a professional shooter or somebody who's just hardcore into it and spends the time or trains year round. And so whether they buy a factory rifle or a custom rifle, they're not going to be shooting at the volume to where realistically, even with a barrel burner, that they're going to honestly need to change that barrel. That's just plain and simple. I mean, I'd estimate about 95% of people will never achieve actually shooting out a barrel. I mean, for those who actually do shoot enough to change a barrel, there's a lot of them that, and that's their choice, that are going to change a barrel when there's no real need. But again, that's up to the individual. I get guys that tell me all the time that I should swap the barrel on this, I should swap it on that, I should swap it on my other guns. I don't see why, because they shoot. I'm not going to toss a barrel just because I've lost a little velocity. Don't be afraid of that. Change your dope. Make sure you can call your wind. It's not going to hurt you that much. People think that you have to have the super fast, and that's just not really reality. But don't be afraid of those cartridges either, because again, the chances of the average hunter, even the guy that trains, in the off season, of them actually reaching the point where that barrel absolutely has to be changed because of throat erosion, where it's just too much. Most people are never going to reach that. And if you do, you can always have the option of just chopping off a couple inches and then rechamber it and save a lot of money doing that. So spend, $500 instead of $1,500. You won't have to wait as long probably either for the gunsmithing to do that, because they don't have to wait for parts, etc. It's all right there. All they got to do is chop it and, do their thing. In conclusion, don't be afraid of barrel wear. Don't be afraid to buy a cartridge because it's a barrel burner. If you want those hardcore ballistics, you want that flat shooting gun, you want to get every advantage you can, then go for it. And realistically, don't worry about losing a little velocity. The vast majority of you are never going to need an actual barrel change on a gun, and most people never do. If you are, and you want to save some money, you can do the trick, and you don't have to do it as many times as some of my buddies where they're, doing it 5 times. If you want to start out with a 26-inch barrel and then chop it to a 24 and just do it one time, and that'll set you for the rest of your life or however long you want to do it, then go for it. Realistically, that's a great way to do it, and it saves you a lot of issues. I do recommend going a little longer in the beginning if that's the plan that you have. But, don't worry so much about barrel wear. It's not as big of a deal as people portray it to be. And they really just overhype it. There's a lot of stuff in the gun world that people do that kind of gets out of context and people don't really question it. And this is one of those things. So, if you're shooting bench rest, then yeah, those guys are very specific on what they need. If you're shooting professionally on PRS, those guys might want a specific thing, and those guys are sponsored and get deals and win barrels and stuff. And so it's very easy for them to do that. But for the average Joe, dropping that kind of money is a serious thing. And some of these guys might spend years saving up just to buy a rifle like this, or, a good scope or something. And that money could be used on other stuff instead of getting a new barrel when it's not needed, or simply just chopping a couple inches off and being set up and good to go. So there's lots of ways you can do this. It's really up to the individual and your needs, wants, etc. But don't be afraid of it. Don't not get a cartridge because you think you're going to be swapping barrels all the time and spending a whole lot of money on that. Or tossing away bad barrels. Even keep them. I guarantee you that if you want to do that and they're, you have that barrel with whatever rounds on it, there's people that'll want that barrel. And you could possibly help hook somebody up and save them money and help them get into the sport by doing that. So ultimately what you do is up to you. But barrel wear, not something to really be that afraid of. You might have to tweak some stuff every once in a while, but it's really not that big of a deal. So everybody, I hope you found this educational and helped. We're going to continue diving through a lot of different videos. Got some cool stuff coming up. thank you all for the support, and I love seeing you guys in the comments and the conversations we have and the dialogue. So jump down there if you have any questions, concerns, or just want to chat. Thanks everybody. Be safe. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video, and happy hunting.